Has DBD become as killer-sided as everyone claims it to be? When scrolling through DBD Twitter, you see many posts about people claiming DBD to be either very heavily survivor-sided or killer-sided. The debates tend to become very heated, so I took this to the test with 25 statistically recorded Billy games.
The conclusion will probably surprise you.
BHVR released stats that showed that the game has about 59 to 61% range of kill rate for every killer, differing between all MMRs and top 5% MMR. Even though Billy was considered to have one of the lowest kill rate in all MMR section, this should be taken with a grain of salt on how strong said killer is, considering Nurse was deemed as the lowest kill rate killer with only 52%. After playing DBD for quite a considerable amount and time, I started noticing with different meta shifts and survivors being more efficient on gens, that from easily 4K almost every game without anything equipped, I went to games where I either had a rough time to 4K or I got 1 to 2 man outed all of a sudden. For some of you this may seem cocky or a little bit stuck up, but I can 100% back these claims with all my streams for the past 2 years or so. I never brag about 4K since I genuinely don't mind, but this did make me curious as to what is needed these days to get a good win condition. Obviously the game on easy mode would have been slapping on 4 gen regression perks and go ham on kicking gens. But that's where my moral code kicks in and tells me I cannot become the next Zip89 or your average pig main and slap on 4 gen perks, combined with mangle add-ons, etc. I chose to run one slowdown perk, Deadlock. The other changes I made to my build was to take Low Pro as my second add-on in combination with Doom engravings, rather than using 2 engravings as you are used of me. The experiment, as far as I consider it to be an experiment, was to see how I could improve my games by switching up my fun perk build, which consisted of Barbecue, Lethal Pursuer, Shadowborn, and Infectious Fright, to the build I just spoke about. I kept a record of every game, including the following statistics. Which realm and map did I play on? How many kills did I get? How many gens got done? How many hook stages did I get? How many survivors eventually escaped? How many kills did I get before 5 gens popped? And what are the averages of all these together? As you can see in the summary graph, there were only 2 games that were, according to DBD's win condition, meaning 2+ kills, counted as a loss. The other 23 games I was able to kill more than 2 survivors. Knowing that the second game I lost, on Macmillan, on Suffopit, was against very good players, including 2 members of the well-known 1v1 clan Ronin. I just came back from a holiday of 2 weeks during my subathon and went against 2 very competent players who were known for their 1v1 rosters. I practiced a lot against Hillbilly. In other words, I skill issued very hard this game, as you can tell in the background, which is said game that I'm currently showing. The other game I lost was RPD, and since I'm mostly used to DC on this map, I still don't even know the difference between South and West Wing. But nonetheless, they were losses that were caused by my own mistakes and because the survivors played very well. A significant difference I noticed during the last few months, and something I now was able to track properly as well, was the increase in gens being done in my games. I noticed that around 30% of the recorded games, survivors were able to finish 5 gens. On average, 3.5 gens were done by the survivors in my games. I must admit, I could have played a little bit more scummy by forcing more stages, camping, tunneling, those kind of things, but yet again, my moral code disallows me to do so. The test was not how a wannabe comp Billy would perform in pubs, but how I, as a pub player, could improve and what was needed. Now we could say that this increase of efficiency on gens means that killer has become harder, you'd say, right? Let me stop you there. Show the kill rate. In nothing less than 72% of my games, I managed to 4K. That means 18 out of 25 games resulted in a 4K, with 60% or 15 games out of 25 ending before all 5 gens popped. That is, in my humble opinion, a good number considering that this many gens on average are being done, when I can claim to have 72% 4K rates with only a 0.42 average escape happening. Does this conclude that the game is massively killer-sided? I would like to say statistically spoken, yes. This means the game is favored towards killer players. However, there's one unmeasurable statistic that everyone tends to forget and that no computer can measure when playing DBD. The calculation of the human factor. The fact that people are either gaming with fun perks, fun builds, meme builds, having a laugh with their friends, etc. These are things that a lot of people tend to forget. And now I'm showing you statistics of my killer games when I am going for statistics. I did sometimes resort to securing a stage, and sometimes tunnel someone out when I found them in a weaker spot. But I also could have played way more competitive, but I think that all these statistics that everyone shows are always to some degree unbased, since we're playing a game, for crying out loud. Sadly enough, I did not go against a fun bully squad to show you what I mean. But there's enough people playing the game after work, just like I do, who just want to go for stupid stuff, do stupid takes, have fun, have a laugh with their friends. This goes for both sides, by the way. People forget that we used to have proper insta-heals, double windows on check, literal infinites. The game has seen worse days. So in my humble opinion, the game can be decided to whoever brings the most OP stuff to the game. The scump callouts like they're eternal, winning their 47 millionth comp tourney. But let's be real here, gamers. You're all the troglodytes you claim not to be, sitting behind your desk, watching anime on your left screen, listening to sad songs on your right screen, the sad little emo songs, just like I'm doing right now, while signing this script. But you're having fun on Discord with your friends, you're not gaming to win as much. So let the conclusion of my first ever analytic experiment be the next. The game decided to whoever does whatever it takes to win in your average public game. You can win with 1 gen slowdown, and there is no need to run 4 gen regression perks unless you're not confident in your own abilities, which is 100% fair game. But once you get more familiar with the killer you're playing, and you get somewhat skill in the game, I genuinely believe you don't need 4 gen regression perks in a public setting. This is coming from someone who genuinely, and I know there's gonna be memes in chat, is in somewhat decent MMR and does get the sweaty insta-heal B&B gamers. I chose 2 games that were perfect cases to go over and analyze what went wrong. First off, we had the 10th game in the analytic experiment. For example, one of the issues I had in the first game that I'm currently showing is that I made the mistake of going into main where I know that there are a lot of pallets and a lot of vaults to get away from me being a killer. The main issue is that it's hard to instantly tell if a survivor knows how to loot properly before initiating a chase with said survivor. Although I knew going into main held the risk of encountering pallets, I could assume that this player was perhaps not as skilled to chain tiles in a correct way. Unluckily enough, this Nancy played very well and dropped pallets in a time-wasting and efficient way for the other survivors to work on gens. In the clip in the background, you can see me talking to chat, telling them how I would have lost 4 gens if Deadlock didn't lock this gen either. That means I lost 4 gens in 1 chase, which is very rough to come back to. Locating and correctly allocating the better survivors often goes hand in hand with winning games. The strong loopers tend to be time wasters, whilst the gen jockeys are doing their job. It was, however, very unfortunate of me to get into a chase with this survivor inside a strong main building against Billy, her being one of the stronger links. But, altogether, this is a problem on my part, where I as a killer should have dropped my ego to better someone in a chase and to go for more gen pressure. Obviously, yet again, this goes hand in hand with me wanting to better my chases on Billy. You may ask yourself, why is Sofa showing us this game if he lost to the strong link? That's a pretty easy answer, because you should never give up until all survivors leave the trial. And as cliché as this may sound, I am currently showing you as to why I tell you this. Once I took care of the strongest link, the other survivors started making many mistakes on their part and allowed me to snowball on a killer that is known to have high snowball potential. As you can tell by the progress of the game, you can see that I only had my 4th hook stage right now a few seconds ago. But as you can tell, the 2 survivors, both injured, were close to me, and the hooked person is in a somewhat enclosed area that they can't reach without me patrolling it. I can perfectly patrol both sides to make sure that I don't get the unhook. Some people may find this somewhat scummy, because this is proxy camping, as people call this. At the other hand, why would I not? I have the perfect allowance here to do this. This is what I call the snowball effect, where I now have 2 people on hook, and with barbecue I can tell where the last person is. This is how I managed to still 4k, even after losing 3 to maybe 4 gens in the first chase in the game. This somewhat shows the point that I was trying to make earlier, that the game can be decided to whoever tries the hardest. At this point, after losing their strongest player, you could tell that they weren't as motivated anymore, and you could tell that the game completely shifted sides. From being survivor-sided to a killer-sided ending. Now for the last game that I'm going to be showing you in today's video of me analyzing Billy gameplay and analyzing whether the game is killer-sided or not, I would like to show you a game I had against 2 Ronin members who are known to be some of the best players in the game, especially in a 1v1 roster, even in 1v4 rosters when it goes against Billy. At first we were memeing in chat, asking everyone, is this real Ivan? Because Ivan is a very well known 1v1 player. If I'm not mistaken, he's in the top 4 on the 1v1 ladder. Just to give you an idea, I believe that Ivan is around number 4 on the 1v1 roster, together with people like Steve. If you watch Samahel or Oddsdarva, you 100% surely have seen Steve win some of the events, if not all of them. Getting back from my 2-week holiday in France, I wasn't mechanically the strongest Billy at this point, but yet again, nowhere to be blamed for this loss. The biggest mistake I made was underestimating my opponent, yet again. Ivan knows perfectly how to loop tiles. Me not realizing it was a real Ivan, I wanted to test out what this survivor could do against me. Yet again, as in the previous game I showed, I followed one of the strongest links first, and I followed them into the main building. Yet again, the main buildings are known to be some of the strongest tiles there are in the game. If I know that main is one of the strongest buildings, then why do I still chase? Very easy. This is somewhat of an ego thing where I want to better myself in chase, so I went for Ivan. After all, after 2 minutes of chasing, I chose to not follow him anymore. But yet again, here you see me making the mistake to keep on following the strongest link in the game. Now I must say that all 4 survivors were very capable. Later on in chase you'll see that I'm chasing one of the other 4 survivors as well, and they actually showed me around the map, same as Ivan. So I went up against a really good squad that knows how to play, knows what they're doing, which proves my point yet again. If you have 4 very competent survivors with many hours, as this lobby had, then you will always have a rough game. As much as people tend to believe that the game is very killer-sided, I would love to see anyone who claims to always win on killer go against a very competent squad, just like the squad I had for example, and see what the outcome is of their games. Yet again, this game I made very big mistakes, mainly going into main building, but as I said in previous game, sometimes you tend to go against survivors that do not properly know how to loop a main building. Once they know how to loop those tiles, it's over for you. Now in this game, the thing that I could have done to somewhat secure stages is proxy camp this person and make sure that if they came over here to get that save, that I could have downed another person. Now I saw scratch marks and I did make the mistake to follow them into a very strong mid-map. As you can tell, the mid-map has many different tiles and many different variations to it. As you can see, they were very chainable. What makes tiles or a mid-map like this very strong? The chainability. I chose to not go into the mid-map anymore and let the survivor go for it, to then come back. The only mistake I made here, somewhat a big mistake, was calculate wrong on how fast they could have made it back to the hook. I thought they were still further off, but shows you they weren't. Here was a very good body block coming in from the Nancy, making sure I could get down. And this stun was very perfectly timed. A few seconds later, I ran into the Nancy again, who ran off after her BT ran out. Her being in the dead zone and being injured makes her the weak link that I should go for. Now, the only thing that I didn't take into account, especially after the recent nerf, is the perk Decisive Strike, which I unluckily hit here. Now this allows her to get way more pressure again and get away, whilst the other person lures me into bait. Now what I didn't exactly really think about was the fact that this survivor was also not that bad, especially because of the skin. This skin is mostly worn by people that are not some of the best players, which was perfect bait, and I fell for it. What I tried to do here is zone her off to make sure she stays into the corner, but she read it perfectly and already made her way back to a very strong tile that is not curvable by Billy. I tried to feather a little bit to make sure she doesn't drop the pallet instantly, but when I go for a clubber, I sadly enough get auto-aimed into the wall, which is a skill issue on my part. Now, the next part she did was very perfect. If I would have started feathering perfectly from the beginning, I could have had a low pro hit, but she read the mind game and actually just dropped the pallet. She makes her way back into the mid-map, where I already spoke about the fact that the mid-map is very strong, especially with all the chainable tiles. And, believe it or not, she chains the tiles almost as perfect as it can get. And luckily, we didn't get the curve here, and she makes her way back into the chainable tiles. In the meantime, gens have been popping, and as you can see, I only have 1 hook stage in comparison to 4 gens being done. Considering the fact I made a really big mistake by following, yet again, the strong link in the beginning into a main building, there were other factors that decided this game for me, such as, for example, Decisive Strike. You may say that Decisive Strike is not as strong as it used to be, and I completely agree on it. I think the nerf is quite harsh. At the other hand, my decision at this point was, once she decides to strike me, she was going to go into the mid-map, so I should go for the healthy person right next to me, because she was in somewhat of a dead zone. Now, as you could tell earlier, I missed the ref, which was my mistake. Here in the endgame I make a very crucial mistake, and that is on my part. I didn't notice that the person had hope Ivan being yet again one of the strongest loopers, as you could tell at the beginning of the game, with Hope is very unbeatable. This hit, without Hope, would have been an actual hit. Now these kind of things tend to show me at least, and I hope some of you too, that the way that this game is pretended to be killer-sided can very easily be countered by really good survivors with some strong perks, especially situational perks, such as Decisive Strike for example. Or in this specific scenario, Hope. Hope cancelled out at least one hit for now on Ivan. This was very unlucky because he did do a crouch tick, but I somewhat read into it because he was too close to the pallet. Now with a very rough endgame in the background playing, I can only say that what I said before on how the game is sided to whoever brings the most OP stuff or brings the best perks is somewhat of a combination of good perks with really good survivors. As you can tell in this game, which I think is a really good example of really good survivors with strong perks, you can tell that the game is not as killer-sided as people make it out to be. As much as I would love to believe it, you cannot tell me after watching this game, even with the mistakes I made, that there was something I could have done against some of these chases. The RNG on maps is a very deciding factor, and the fact that you have good survivors that can chain RNG tiles makes this game not very heavily killer-sided, in my honest opinion. Yet again, for the people that have watched through all the video, I am somebody that genuinely plays a 50-50, and I can tell that this game is not heavily sided towards any side. If anything, the game feels more balanced than anything before.
I've been daisy, life is getting hazy. I can take it, life is fucking crazy. Yeah, I'm new to this, don't know much, my baby. Can you help me before I go?